The office was quiet except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional rustle of papers. Captain Amelia Reyes sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the intelligence report before her. 20 years in military intelligence had taught her to recognize patterns others missed, to see connections where others saw only chaos. But this was something different. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I have saved something extra special for you. The report detailed a failed extraction operation in North Africa. 3 Special Forces operators captured, 2 critically wounded. Standard procedure would have been to execute a high-risk recovery mission, but according to the after-action report, the team had been recovered by an unidentified asset who had left no trace, no identification, no official record, just a call sign: Wraith. Amelia's phone vibrated, breaking her concentration. The caller ID displayed a number she hadn't seen in years: Colonel Marcus Blackwood, her former commanding officer and mentor. "Captain Reyes," she answered, her voice crisp and professional despite the surprise. "It's been a while, Amelia," Blackwood replied, his voice carrying the weight of years spent in command. "I hear you've been asking questions about Wraith." Amelia stiffened. The inquiry had been classified, buried under layers of security protocols. "Sir, with respect." "I'm not calling to shut you down," Blackwood interrupted. "I'm calling because you need to understand what you're dealing with. The Wraith program isn't just classified. It's a ghost story most of the intelligence community doesn't believe exists." "Then why tell me about it?" Amelia asked, her curiosity piqued. "Because they're recruiting again. And because I recommended you." The line went silent for a moment before Blackwood continued. "There's a coffee shop on the corner of 7th and Pine. Be there at 0700 tomorrow. Come alone. And Amelia, leave your phone at home." The call ended before she could respond. The following morning, Amelia arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, her military punctuality deeply ingrained. She ordered a black coffee and selected a table with a clear view of both entrances, her back to the wall, another habit from years in the field. At precisely 0700, a woman entered the cafe. She was of average height with an athletic build, dressed in civilian clothes that were deliberately unremarkable. But the way she moved, fluid, calculated, constantly aware, marked her as military. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her face composed in an expression of neutral assessment. Without hesitation, the woman approached Amelia's table and sat down. "Captain Reyes," she said, her voice low and measured. "My name is Commander Sophia Wright. I understand Colonel Blackwood spoke with you." Amelia nodded, studying the woman across from her. There was something in her eyes, a calm intensity that seemed at odds with her otherwise unremarkable appearance. "I've reviewed your service record," Wright continued. 15 deployments. Expert in signals intelligence. Fluent in 5 languages. Multiple commendations for operations in denied areas. You're exactly the kind of officer we're looking for." "For what, exactly?" Amelia asked, keeping her voice level despite her growing curiosity. Wright smiled slightly. "Tell me, Captain, have you ever heard of a ghost who saves lives instead of haunting them?" Before Amelia could respond, Wright slid a small metal card across the table. It was blank except for a set of coordinates and a timestamp for 2,200 hours that evening. "If you want answers, be at these coordinates tonight. Come alone. No electronic devices. No weapons." Wright stood, smoothing her jacket. "Oh, and Captain?" This conversation never happened. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The coordinates led Amelia to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The structure loomed against the night sky, a hulking shadow of corrugated metal and broken windows. Every instinct honed from years of military service screamed that this was a trap, yet curiosity pushed her forward. She approached cautiously, scanning for signs of surveillance or ambush. The main entrance was chained shut, but a side door stood slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, Amelia slipped inside. The interior was pitch black, the darkness so complete it seemed to press against her skin. She stood motionless, allowing her eyes to adjust, listening for any sound that might betray another presence. "Captain Reyes?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the metal walls. "Thank you for coming." Suddenly, lights blazed to life, temporarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, Amelia found herself in a large, open space. The warehouse's interior had been transformed into what appeared to be a tactical operations center. Computer stations lined the walls, multiple screens displaying satellite imagery, personnel files, and mission parameters. A dozen individuals moved efficiently between stations, their focus absolute. At the center of the room stood Commander Wright, flanked by two operators whose bearing marked them as special forces. "Welcome to Wraith," Wright said, gesturing for Amelia to approach. "At least, one small corner of it." As Amelia moved closer, she noticed something unusual about the operators. They wore no rank insignia, no unit patches, no identifying markers of any kind. Their tactical gear was non-standard, a hybrid of military, intelligence, and civilian equipment that seemed designed for maximum versatility and minimum attribution. "What exactly is Wraith?" Amelia asked, her eyes taking in the operation around her. "Officially? It doesn't exist," Wright replied. "Unofficially, we're a multi-agency task force specializing in high-risk extraction operations in denied or hostile territories. The kind of operations that conventional forces can't execute, and that governments need complete deniability for." One of the operators stepped forward, a tall woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. "We're the option of last resort, Captain. When everything else fails, when people are left behind enemy lines with no hope of recovery, we're the ones who go in." "And who exactly are you?" Amelia asked. "Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez," the woman replied. "Former Delta, former CIA Special Activities Division. Now I'm just a ghost." Wright gestured toward a digital display showing a map of a mountainous region. 3 days ago, a CIA asset with critical intelligence was compromised in Chechnya. Extraction protocols failed. The Russians have deployed their best counterintelligence teams to find her before we can. Conventional extraction is impossible. "So Wraith goes in," Amelia concluded. "Exactly," Wright nodded. "But we have a problem. Our communications specialist was injured on our last operation. We need someone who can coordinate signals intelligence, manage communication channels, and interface with assets on the ground. Someone like you." Amelia frowned. "With respect, Commander, I'm an intelligence officer, not a field operative." Vasquez laughed, the sound sharp and sudden. "None of us are what we used to be, Captain. That's the point. We become whatever the mission requires." Wright's expression remained neutral. "This isn't an order, Captain. It's an invitation. You can walk out that door, return to your regular duties, and forget this ever happened. Or you can stay and become part of something few people will ever know exists. But that makes all the difference in the world to those we save." Amelia hesitated, weighing the implications. Her current position was secure, respected, with a clear path to advancement. This, whatever this was, offered only uncertainty and danger. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Because Colonel Blackwood said, you're the kind of officer who understands that sometimes the most important victories are the ones no one ever hears about," Wright replied. "And because your technical skills are exactly what we need right now." Amelia took a deep breath, decision crystallizing. "When do we start?" The next 48 hours were a blur of briefings, equipment familiarization, and crash courses in Wraith's unique operational protocols. Amelia learned that the organization pulled operators from across military and intelligence agencies, creating teams that existed outside traditional command structures but could leverage resources from multiple sources when necessary. "The key to understanding Wraith," Vasquez explained as they prepared communications equipment, "is that we don't exist until we need to, and then we cease to exist again. No footprint, no trace, like smoke." The operation was set to launch at midnight. The target, a CIA analyst named Sarah Petrovna who had been embedded with Russian separatists for 3 years, was believed to be hiding in a remote village in the Caucasus Mountains. Russian intelligence services had the area locked down, with aerial surveillance, ground patrols, and electronic monitoring making conventional extraction impossible. The team consisted of 6 operators, each with specialized skills and backgrounds. Besides Vasquez and Amelia, there was Torres, a former Navy SEAL explosives expert, Chen, a cyber warfare specialist who had worked for the NSA, Jackson, a medical officer with battlefield trauma experience, and Williams, a former Army Ranger skilled in alpine operations. Our insertion will be halo jump from a civilian cargo plane with falsified flight plans. Wright explained during the final briefing. We'll land 15 kilometers from the target location and proceed on foot to avoid detection. Captain Reyes will coordinate communications and monitor Russian military channels to track patrols. Extraction will be via helicopter from a secondary location once we have the package. The briefing room door opened, and a man in his mid-50s entered. Tall and imposing, with salt and pepper hair and the unmistakable bearing of senior military command, he surveyed the team with piercing blue eyes. "General," Wright acknowledged, straightening slightly. "Commander," the man nodded before addressing the team. "I won't take much of your time. You all understand the stakes. If Petrovna is captured, 3 years of deep cover intelligence work is compromised, and a valuable asset is lost. More importantly, a fellow American is abandoned behind enemy lines." His gaze settled on Amelia. "Captain Reyes, this is your first operation with Wraith. Remember our core principle: we leave no one behind. Not the package, not your teammates. Everyone comes home." "Yes, sir," Amelia replied, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "Godspeed," the general said simply before leaving as quickly as he had arrived. As the team made final preparations, Amelia found herself checking and rechecking her gear. The communication system was unlike anything she'd worked with before, a hybrid of military-grade encryption and civilian technology designed to be undetectable and untraceable. "Nervous?" Vasquez asked, approaching as Amelia tested frequency ranges. "Focused," Amelia replied, not looking up from her equipment. Vasquez smiled slightly. "Good answer, but it's okay to be nervous too. First op with a new team is always tense." Amelia finally looked up. "Can I ask you something, Sergeant?" "Elena," Vasquez corrected. "We don't use rank here. Too easy to trace." "Elena, then. How did you end up with Wraith?" The other woman was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. 3 years ago, my conventional unit was ambushed in Syria. Official policy was that rescue was impossible. Too risky, too politically complicated. I was left for dead." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a jagged scar that ran from wrist to elbow. "I would have been dead if Wraith hadn't come for me. After I recovered, there was no question where I belonged." "So you're all rescued operatives?" Amelia asked. "Some of us. Others were recruited for specific skills. Some volunteered after witnessing what happens when conventional rescue isn't an option." Vasquez checked her watch. "Wheels up in 30. Get your head in the game, Captain." The cargo plane was ancient, a relic from the Cold War era now registered to a fictional shipping company. The interior had been stripped and modified, creating just enough space for the team and their equipment. As they ascended to jump altitude, Amelia felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Not fear, but the acute awareness that once they jumped, there would be no backup, no quick extraction if things went wrong. At 30,000 feet, the jump light turned green. One by one, the team disappeared into the night sky, falling through darkness toward a mission that officially didn't exist. Amelia was last, taking a deep breath before stepping into the void. The free fall was 18 seconds of pure sensory overload. The roar of wind, the bite of sub-zero temperatures, the overwhelming vastness of the night sky. Then her chute deployed, and sudden silence enveloped her as she drifted toward the designated landing zone. The team regrouped quickly after landing, burying their chutes and donning camouflage appropriate for the mountainous terrain. Amelia activated her communications gear, immediately scanning for Russian military frequencies. 2 patrols within our operational area, she reported quietly. 1 stationary at the village perimeter, 1 mobile along the eastern ridge. Satellite imagery shows a surveillance drone on regular sweeps from the south. Vasquez nodded, studying the topographical map. "We'll move through this ravine to avoid the drone's flight path. Torres, take point. Williams, rear security. Reyes, stay on those frequencies and alert us to any changes in patrol patterns." They moved through the night with practiced efficiency, covering 8 kilometers of treacherous mountain terrain before dawn forced them to seek cover in a dense forest area. As the team established a temporary position, Amelia continued monitoring communications while trying to establish contact with their target. "I've got something," she whispered after several tense hours. "Encrypted burst transmission on one of our emergency frequencies. It's using an outdated authentication protocol, but the pattern matches Petrovna's documented methods." "Can you trace it?" Vasquez asked, moving to Amelia's position. "Already triangulating." Signal originated approximately 2 kilometers northeast of the village, not at her last known location. Chen, the cyber specialist, frowned. "Could be a trap. Russians might have captured her equipment. Or she's on the move, trying to reach an extraction point," Jackson countered. Vasquez considered for a moment. "We split. Chen, Jackson, Williams continued to the village as planned. Verify if she was there and where she might have gone. Torres, Reyes, and I will investigate the signal origin. Maintain communication blackout unless absolutely necessary. Rendezvous at checkpoint Charlie at 2,200 hours." As the teams separated, Amelia felt a flicker of uncertainty. The plan had changed. The team had divided, and they were moving toward an unconfirmed signal in hostile territory. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the mission parameters and her role within them. Vasquez led them through increasingly difficult terrain, moving with a predator's stealth despite the rocky ground and dense vegetation. After 90 minutes of careful progress, they reached a ridgeline overlooking a small clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated hunting cabin, seemingly abandoned. "Heat signatures?" Vasquez whispered. Torres scanned with a thermal device. One human inside. No other signatures within 200 meters. "Stay here, maintain overwatch," Vasquez instructed Torres before turning to Amelia. "Reyes, with me. If this is Petrovna, she'll respond to authentication codes. If it's not, we need to know who's using her protocols." They approached the cabin cautiously, using natural cover to mask their approach. At the door, Vasquez positioned herself to one side, weapon ready, while Amelia prepared to transmit the authentication sequence from her specialized communications device. The response was immediate, 3 short pulses acknowledging receipt, followed by the correct counter sequence. Vasquez nodded, and Amelia knocked on the door in the predetermined pattern. The door opened slowly to reveal a woman in her early 30s, gaunt and exhausted, but with alert eyes that assessed them with professional caution. "Took you long enough," she said in accented English. "Circumstances complicated extraction timelines," Vasquez replied formally before giving the final verification phrase. "The winter in Moscow is colder than expected. But spring comes eventually to those who wait," the woman completed the exchange, visibly relaxing. "Sarah Petrovna, though I haven't used that name in 3 years. Elena Vasquez. This is Amelia Reyes, our communications specialist. How compromised is your position?" "Very," Petrovna replied grimly, stepping back to allow them entry. "Russians identified me 4 days ago. I've been moving constantly since then. My handler was captured yesterday during our attempted rendezvous." The interior of the cabin was sparse, a wooden table, a single chair, a fireplace that clearly hadn't been used in years. Petrovna had set up a minimal operating post with a satellite phone and what appeared to be handmade signal boosters. "Clever setup," Amelia commented, examining the equipment. "Engineering degree before the agency recruited me," Petrovna explained. "I had to improvise after my standard equipment was compromised." Vasquez was checking the windows, her movements precise and economical. "What's your physical condition? Can you move quickly over difficult terrain?" Quote, "I have a minor shrapnel wound in my left leg from a near miss 2 days ago, but it won't slow me down," Petrovna replied. "I've had worse." Amelia activated her secure communication device, preparing to contact the other half of their team, when her signal detector flashed a warning. Multiple radio frequencies just went active within 1 kilometer. Military-grade encryption, Russian Special Forces pattern. Vasquez's expression hardened. "They've found us. Pack up, we move in 2 minutes." "Torres, She spoke into her comm unit. Situation? 3 vehicles approaching from the east. Torres's voice came through, tense but controlled. Special forces by the look of the equipment. ETA, 4 minutes. Acknowledged. Maintain position until we clear the cabin, then fall back to Rendezvous Point Baker. Petrovna was already dismantling her equipment with practiced efficiency. There's a ravine system to the west that local shepherds use. It doesn't appear on standard maps. Show me, Vasquez demanded, unfolding their tactical map. As Petrovna indicated the escape route, Amelia continued monitoring the approaching Russian forces. They're coordinating a surrounding maneuver. Standard 3-point containment. Time to disappear, Vasquez said grimly, securing her weapon. Reyes, contact the other team. Tell them to abort village reconnaissance and proceed directly to extraction point Charlie. Petrovna, leave everything non-essential. Torres, we're moving west through the ravine system. Provide covering fire only if absolutely necessary. They slipped out the back of the cabin just as the first Russian vehicle became visible on the distant road. Moving in a low crouch, the 3 women made their way toward the ravine while Torres maintained overwatch from his elevated position. The ravine was treacherous, a narrow slash in the earth with steep, crumbling sides and a floor of loose rock that threatened to announce their presence with every step. They moved as quickly as safety allowed, putting distance between themselves and the cabin that had now certainly been discovered. Contact! Torres's calm voice came through the comm. Russians have reached the cabin. Full tactical team, at least 8 operators. They're setting up a search pattern. Can you disengage without detection? Vasquez asked. Affirmative. Moving to secondary position now. They continued through the ravine for nearly an hour, the physical demands of the terrain clearly taking a toll on Petrovna despite her earlier assurances. When they finally stopped to reassess their position, Amelia noticed fresh blood seeping through the crude bandage on the analyst's leg. That needs attention, she said quietly. Petrovna shook her head. After extraction, it's nothing. It won't be nothing if infection sets in. Vasquez countered, already signaling Jackson via their secure communication system. Our medic will rendezvous with us at Checkpoint Baker. Until then, we keep moving. As they prepared to continue, Amelia's communication system detected new transmissions. Multiple helicopters mobilizing from the Russian base 30 kilometers east. They're expanding the search parameters. Vasquez cursed softly. They're committing serious resources. This goes beyond a routine security operation. It's not routine, Petrovna said grimly. The intelligence I'm carrying changes everything. That's why extraction became priority 1. What exactly are you carrying? Amelia asked. Evidence of direct Russian involvement in assassinations on NATO's soil. Names, dates, operational details, everything needed to expose their entire program. The implications were immediately clear to both Wraith operators. If Petrovna was captured, not only would she face certain death, but the opportunity to hold Russia accountable for its actions would be lost. We need to move faster, Vasquez decided. Checkpoint Baker is still 4 kilometers. If Russian forces are expanding their search this aggressively, our original extraction plan is compromised. Amelia checked her tactical map. There is a secondary extraction point at these coordinates. It would mean crossing more exposed terrain, but it cuts our travel distance in half and puts us directly in the path of those helicopters, Vasquez pointed out. Not if we time it correctly, Amelia countered. The ravine system continues west for another kilometer before opening into a valley. If we calculate the helicopter search patterns based on standard Russian protocols, there should be a window of approximately 15 minutes when their flight paths create a blind spot over the northern section of the valley. Vasquez studied her with newfound respect. You've done this before. Theoretical scenarios at the academy, Amelia admitted. Never in the field. First time for everything, Vasquez said with a grim smile before activating her comm. All Wraith elements, this is lead. Primary extraction plan is compromised. Converge on secondary extraction point Delta. Reyes will transmit timing window for movement across the valley. As they continued through the ravine, Amelia worked furiously to calculate exact helicopter search patterns and identify the optimal window for crossing the exposed terrain that lay ahead. The lives of the entire team now depended on her ability to predict enemy movements with precision. The ravine eventually widened, the steep walls gradually becoming more manageable as they approached the valley. They paused at the final point of cover, surveying the open ground they would need to cross. In the distance, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoed off the mountains. "Window opens in approximately 3 minutes," Amelia reported, checking her calculations again. "We'll have 12 minutes to cover 800 meters of open ground before the next helicopter enters our sector." Torres joined them, having navigated a parallel route to reach their position. His expression was tense. Russians have deployed ground teams with dogs. They're moving faster than expected. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Behind them, Russian search teams with tracking dogs. Ahead, a dangerous dash across open terrain with aerial surveillance actively searching for them. And they still had to rendezvous with the rest of their team and reach the extraction point. "Status of the rest of the team?" Vasquez asked. "Already moving toward extraction point Delta," Torres replied. "Chen reports Russian communications indicate they've identified Petrovna and have orders to capture or eliminate with extreme prejudice." "Of course they do," Petrovna muttered, checking the improvised bandage on her leg. "I've made a lot of powerful enemies." Amelia continued monitoring the helicopter movements, watching as the first search aircraft passed to the south of their position. "Window opening in 30 seconds. Once we start moving, we don't stop until we reach the tree line on the far side." Vasquez raised her hand, counting down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. "Move," she ordered, and they burst from cover, racing across the exposed ground of the valley. Amelia felt painfully visible as she ran, every instinct screaming that they were being watched, being targeted. The open terrain offered no concealment, no protection if they were spotted. Her lungs burned as she pushed herself to maintain pace with Vasquez, who moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had done this countless times before. Petrovna kept up remarkably well despite her injury, her face set in grim determination. Whatever she had endured during her 3 years under cover had clearly forged an impressive resilience. They had covered half the distance when the sound of rotors grew louder, a helicopter approaching faster than Amelia's calculations had predicted. Torres was the first to react, veering slightly to direct them toward a shallow depression in the ground. Not true cover, but enough to reduce their visibility from the air. They dropped into the depression, pressing their bodies flat against the earth as the helicopter passed overhead. Amelia felt her heart hammering against her ribs, certain that at any moment searchlights would pin them to the ground and gunfire would follow. But the aircraft continued on its predetermined search pattern, the pilots unaware of how close they had come to their targets. "Adjustment to window," Amelia whispered as soon as the helicopter was out of earshot. "We have 7 minutes remaining before the next aircraft enters this sector." They resumed their dash across the valley, reaching the tree line with less than a minute to spare. As they moved into the cover of the forest, Amelia checked her communications system, picking up encrypted transmissions from the rest of their team. "Chen reports they're at checkpoint Delta, preparing for extraction," she informed Vasquez. "Helicopter is on standby 20 kilometers southwest, awaiting our signal." "ETA to their position?" Vasquez asked, checking Petrovna's wound as they continued moving through the forest. 40 minutes at current pace." Torres calculated. "But Russian ground teams will converge on this area within 30 based on their search patterns." Vasquez made a quick decision. "We split again. Torres, you and Reyes get Petrovna to the extraction point. I'll create a diversion to draw off the search teams." "Negative," Amelia responded immediately. "That violates protocol. No one operates alone." "This isn't a debate, Captain," Vasquez replied, her tone hardening. "The mission priority is getting Petrovna and her intelligence out. Everything else is secondary." "There's another option," Amelia countered, pulling up the topographical map on her device. "These elevation readings indicate a river gorge 2 kilometers southeast. If we can reach it, the water will mask our heat signatures and confuse the tracking dogs." Vasquez studied the map, considering. "It's risky. The gorge could slow us down too much." "Less risky than splitting the team," Torres interjected, siding with Amelia. "Commander Wright was explicit. We all come home." For a tense moment, Vasquez seemed ready to overrule them both. Then Petrovna spoke up. "The gorge is our best option. I've operated in this region before. The local military avoids the river system due to unpredictable currents and difficult terrain. They'll expect us to take the most direct route to extraction." "Fine," Vasquez conceded, "but we move fast. No stops." They altered course, pushing through increasingly dense forest toward the river gorge. Amelia maintained constant communication with the rest of the team, coordinating their movements and monitoring Russian search patterns. The enemy was adapting quickly, their search grid tightening around the area. When they reached the gorge, they found a fast-flowing river cutting through steep rock walls. The water was dark and cold, flowing with the melted snow from higher elevations. "We follow it downstream," Vasquez decided after a quick assessment. "The extraction point is southwest. This will take us in the right direction while providing cover from thermal imaging." They began moving along the narrow rocky banks, the rushing water masking their sounds and cooling their heat signatures. The terrain was treacherous. Slippery rocks, fallen trees, and narrow passages where they had to press against the cliff face to avoid falling into the churning waters below. Despite the difficulties, they made good progress. Amelia's calculations showed they would reach the extraction point just ahead of the adjusted timeline. The rest of the team had already secured the area and prepared for immediate departure once they arrived. Then, disaster struck. As they navigated a particularly narrow section of the gorge, the rock beneath Petrovna's injured leg gave way. She stumbled, a cry of pain escaping before she could suppress it, and slid toward the edge of the rushing water. Torres reacted instantly, lunging to grab her before she fell completely. He caught her arm, but the momentum carried them both dangerously close to the edge. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they would both be swept away by the current. Amelia and Vasquez moved in unison, securing anchoring positions and creating a human chain to pull them back from the brink. When they were all safely on solid ground again, Petrovna's face was ashen, her wound bleeding freely through the now-soaked bandage. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. "We need to keep moving." 2 minutes, Vasquez countered, nodding to Torres, who immediately began replacing the compromised bandage. "Reyes, communications check." Amelia activated her system, preparing to update the rest of the team, when she froze. The communications channels were flooded with new activity. Russian forces were converging on their position with alarming precision. "They heard her," Amelia realized. "That cry when she fell, they must have scouts closer than we thought." Vasquez's expression hardened. "How many, and how close?" "Multiple teams, closing from the north and east. Nearest is approximately 800 meters and moving fast." Torres finished securing the fresh bandage on Petrovna's leg. "We need to move, now." They continued downstream with renewed urgency, the knowledge that enemy forces were actively closing and adding a desperate edge to their movements. Petrovna pushed through her pain, keeping pace despite her injury, but it was clear she was reaching her physical limits. After another kilometer of difficult terrain, they reached a point where the gorge widened, the river spreading into a broader, calmer flow. On the far bank, a steep trail led up and away from the water toward higher ground. "That's our exit point," Vasquez decided. "We cross here, then make for the extraction point." The water was chest-deep and bitterly cold, the current still strong enough to be dangerous. They crossed in pairs, Torres supporting Petrovna, while Vasquez and Amelia provided security from both banks. The crossing took valuable minutes, each of them emerging on the far side soaking wet and chilled to the bone. As they began climbing the trail away from the river, Amelia's communications system picked up a transmission that made her blood run cold. "Multiple helicopters redirecting to our position. They've narrowed the search area to this section of the gorge. They're tracking us too efficiently," Vasquez said, her voice taut with suspicion. "This isn't normal search protocol." Petrovna stopped abruptly, her expression shifting from determination to grim understanding. "It's not you they're tracking. It's me." Before anyone could respond, she pulled down the collar of her jacket, revealing a small, raised mark on her neck. "During my last meeting with my handler. I thought it was just a scratch from the underbrush when we were escaping. It must be a tracker. Vasquez examined the mark, her expression darkening. Subdermal tracker, newest generation. Practically undetectable unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Can we remove it? Torres asked. Not here. Not safely, Vasquez replied. And not in time. The implications were clear. As long as Petrovna was with them, Russian forces would be able to track their every movement. The extraction point would be compromised the moment they arrived. The entire team would be at risk. Petrovna understood immediately. You need to leave me. Complete the mission without me. Not happening, Vasquez responded flatly. We don't leave people behind. The intelligence is what matters, Petrovna argued. I've memorized everything. I can brief you right now, and you can deliver the information. We're not leaving you, Amelia interjected. Her mind was racing, searching for alternatives. Then an idea formed. Dangerous, possibly foolish, but potentially their only option. We don't have to. The others turned to her expectantly. The tracker only shows location, not identity, Amelia explained. If we create a diversion, something that will draw their attention to a different position, we might be able to extract without them realizing. What kind of diversion? Torres asked. Amelia hesitated only briefly before committing. Me. I'll take your jacket, she said to Petrovna. Something with your DNA on it. They'll track the signal, but they'll find me instead of you. That's suicide, Vasquez objected immediately. Not if I use the terrain to my advantage. Amelia countered. I can lead them on a false trail, then double back to a secondary extraction point once you're clear. Too risky. Torres shook his head. We stick together. We're out of options, Amelia insisted. Every minute we debate, they get closer. This is the mission, getting Petrovna and her intelligence out safely. I'm giving us the best chance to accomplish that. Vasquez studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing the proposal against their dwindling alternatives. You're sure about this? Completely, Amelia replied with more confidence than she felt. After another moment of consideration, Vasquez nodded. Timing will be critical. We'll need to coordinate the primary extraction and your secondary pickup with perfect precision. They quickly developed a plan. Amelia would take Petrovna's outer jacket, which would carry trace DNA that Russian scanners could detect. She would head east, away from the extraction point, creating a false trail for Russian forces to follow. Meanwhile, the rest of the team would get Petrovna to the primary extraction point for immediate evacuation. Once the helicopter was away safely, Amelia would make her way to a secondary pickup point 10 kilometers distant. The timing would be tight, requiring her to evade Russian forces for at least 2 hours after separating from the team. If anything goes wrong, abort and head for the emergency extraction point here. Vasquez instructed, marking a location on Amelia's map. Wraith protocol dictates we'll have personnel standing by for 48 hours. Understood, Amelia nodded, checking her equipment one final time. Petrovna removed her jacket and handed it to Amelia, her expression solemn. I can't ask you to do this. You're not asking, Amelia replied, slipping the jacket on over her own. It's my choice. Why? Petrovna asked quietly. You don't even know me. Amelia considered the question. Why was she risking her life for a stranger? For intelligence that, while valuable, would likely be just one piece in a much larger geopolitical puzzle? Because this is what Wraith does, she answered finally. We don't leave people behind. The team synchronized their watches and communications equipment. Their window for success was narrow, requiring perfect execution from everyone involved. See you at extraction point Omega, Vasquez said as they prepared to separate. Count on it, Amelia replied with more confidence than she felt. With a final nod to her teammates, Amelia turned and began moving east, away from the extraction point and toward the most treacherous terrain in the region. As she climbed higher into the mountains, she could hear helicopter rotors in the distance, closing in on her position. The plan was working. The Russian forces were following her signal, redirecting their search efforts away from the primary extraction point. She pushed herself harder, maintaining a pace that would draw them further from her team while preserving enough energy for the long evasion that would follow. After 20 minutes of challenging climbing, Amelia reached a ridgeline that offered a momentary vantage point. In the distance, she could see multiple helicopters circling, their searchlights sweeping the terrain. Ground forces would not be far behind. Her communications device vibrated with an encrypted message from Vasquez. Package secured. Primary extraction in progress. Secondary extraction on schedule. Maintain course. Relief flooded through her. Petrovna had reached the extraction point safely. The core mission was succeeding. Now she just needed to survive long enough to reach her own extraction. Amelia continued moving, using every trick she had learned in her years of intelligence training. She chose routes that would be difficult for tracking dogs to follow, crossed rocky terrain that would leave minimal traces, and used natural features to mask her heat signature from aerial thermal imaging. Despite her efforts, the Russian forces were gaining ground. They had resources she couldn't match, dozens of personnel, advanced tracking equipment, and seemingly unlimited air support. It was only a matter of time before they closed the net around her. As she climbed higher into the mountains, the temperature dropped precipitously. The wet clothes from the river crossing now worked against her, the cold seeping into her bones and slowing her movements. She needed to find shelter, if only for a few minutes, to reassess and plan her next move. A rocky outcropping ahead offered potential cover. Amelia made her way toward it, moving carefully to minimize any trail she might leave. As she approached, she noticed an unusual shadow beneath the outcropping, not just the darkness of shade, but a deeper blackness that suggested an opening. It was a small cave entrance, nearly invisible unless viewed from the exact angle she had approached. Without hesitation, Amelia squeezed through the narrow opening, finding herself in a space just large enough to sit upright. The cave extended further back, but the passage quickly became too narrow for her to follow. From this position, she could observe the surrounding terrain while remaining hidden from aerial surveillance. It was the perfect temporary shelter to regroup and plan her next move. Amelia checked her communications device. The primary extraction had been completed successfully. Petrovna and the rest of the team were already airborne, heading for the safety of friendly territory. Her own extraction was scheduled in 90 minutes at a location still 6 kilometers distant through difficult mountain terrain. It would be challenging under ideal conditions. With Russian forces actively hunting her and the temperature continuing to drop as night approached, it would be nearly impossible. But impossible wasn't in Wraith's vocabulary. Amelia used her brief respite to dry her equipment as best she could and check her supplies. She had limited rations, a first aid kit, her communications gear, and a compact sidearm with 2 magazines of ammunition. Not ideal for an extended evasion, but enough if she used her wits and the terrain to maximum advantage. After 15 minutes of rest, Amelia prepared to move again. As she approached the cave entrance, her communications device picked up Russian radio traffic less than 500 meters away. They were closer than she had realized, closing in with alarming precision. She had no choice but to remain hidden and hope they would pass by without discovering her position. Retreating deeper into the cave, Amelia pressed herself into the shadows, controlling her breathing and remaining perfectly still as footsteps approached the entrance. Russian voices carried clearly in the mountain air, 2 operators discussing search patterns and tracking data. They paused near the cave entrance, close enough that Amelia could hear the crunch of their boots on the rocky ground. For a heart-stopping moment, a beam of light swept across the cave entrance. Amelia held her breath, certain that discovery was imminent. But the light moved on, the operators continuing their sweep of the area without identifying the hidden opening. When their voices had faded into the distance, Amelia allowed herself to breathe again. The close call had been too near for comfort, but it also provided valuable intelligence. The Russian search pattern indicated they were working in a standard grid, moving methodically across the terrain. With that knowledge, she could predict their movements and find gaps in their coverage. Checking her map again, Amelia plotted a new route to the extraction point. Instead of taking the most direct path, which would likely be heavily monitored, she would use the mountain's natural features to move perpendicular to the Russian search grid, effectively slipping between their lines. It would add distance to her journey, but significantly increase her chances of reaching extraction undetected. As darkness fell, Amelia emerged from the cave and began implementing her plan. The night brought new challenges: reduced visibility, plummeting temperatures, and the increased risk of injury on the treacherous terrain. But it also provided cover, making it harder for the Russians to track her movements visually. She moved with deliberate care, each step calculated to balance speed against safety. The extraction window would close in 70 minutes, and she still had over 4 kilometers to cover through some of the most difficult terrain in the region. The Russian presence remained heavy, with helicopters making periodic sweeps using thermal imaging and ground teams communicating constantly on encrypted channels that Amelia monitored to track their positions. Her route took her through narrow ravines and dense forest patches, using natural features to mask her heat signature and muffle any sounds of her passage. 50 minutes before extraction, disaster struck. As Amelia navigated a particularly steep section, loose rocks gave way beneath her foot, sending her sliding several meters down the slope before she could arrest her fall. The noise was minimal, but the sudden movement created a clear heat signature that would be visible on any active thermal imaging in the area. Sure enough, within minutes, a helicopter altered course toward her position. They had detected her. Amelia abandoned stealth for speed, moving as quickly as safety allowed toward the extraction point. Her only chance now was to reach the pickup zone before Russian forces could intercept her. Behind her, she could hear voices calling to each other as ground teams converged on her last known position. With 30 minutes remaining until extraction, Amelia reached the edge of a wide clearing, the designated pickup zone. But instead of the expected empty space, she found Russian forces already in position, clearly anticipating an extraction attempt. They had predicted her destination. The secondary extraction point was compromised. Amelia retreated into the tree line, her mind racing through alternatives. The emergency extraction point was too distant to reach before her window closed. The primary extraction point had already been used and would be under heavy surveillance. She was effectively cut off from all planned escape routes. For the first time since the mission began, Amelia felt a wave of despair threatening to overwhelm her. She had failed. Despite her best efforts, despite the successful extraction of Petrovna and her intelligence, Amelia herself would not be making it home. Then a memory surfaced, something Commander Wright had said during her briefing. Wraith exists in the spaces between official protocols. When conventional options fail, we create new ones. Amelia checked her map again, this time looking not for designated extraction points, but for terrain features that could serve as improvised landing zones. There, 3 kilometers northwest of her position, a narrow ridge with just enough flat space for a skilled pilot to attempt a dangerous extraction. It wasn't in any official plan, wasn't part of any protocol, but it might just work. She activated her emergency communication channel, bypassing standard encryption to send a burst transmission directly to Wraith Command. Primary and secondary extraction compromised. Request immediate pickup at coordinates 44, 27N, 42, 83E. Terrain limited, approach from southwest only. Window closing. The response came almost immediately. Message received. Assets redirecting. Hold position. Verification code. Wraith 1. Wraith 1. The highest priority extraction code in the system. Command was committing everything to get her out. With the extraction plan set in motion, Amelia needed to reach the ridge before Russian forces could intercept her. The new location was less than ideal. A narrow, rocky plateau with sheer drops on 3 sides and dense forest on the 4th. Any helicopter attempting to land there would be taking an enormous risk, especially in the darkness of night. But risk was what Wraith specialized in. Amelia plotted the most direct route, knowing that stealth was now secondary to speed. Russian forces had detected her presence and were actively converging on her last known position. She had perhaps 20 minutes to cover 3 kilometers of treacherous mountain terrain in near total darkness. She moved with controlled urgency, pushing her body to its limits while remaining mindful of the deadly drops and unstable ground that surrounded her. Each step required careful calculation. A misstep at this altitude could be fatal long before Russian forces ever reached her. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder as she climbed. Multiple aircraft now crisscrossing the search area. Searchlights swept across the mountainside, illuminating patches of terrain in harsh white light before plunging them back into darkness. Amelia used the rhythmic pattern of the searches to time her movements, freezing in place when the lights approached and sprinting forward when they moved away. At one point, a searchlight passed directly over her position as she pressed herself against a rocky outcropping. For a heart-stopping moment, she was certain she had been spotted. But the light continued its sweep, the helicopter maintaining its search pattern rather than zeroing in on her location, With 15 minutes remaining until her extraction window, Amelia reached the base of the ridge that would serve as her improvised extraction point. The final climb was nearly vertical, 100 meters of exposed rock face with minimal handholds and no margin for error. Under normal circumstances, such a climb would require proper equipment and ideal conditions. Amelia had neither. What she did have was the absolute certainty that this ridge represented her only chance of survival. She began climbing, fingers searching for any crack or protrusion that could support her weight. The rock was cold and occasionally slick with ice, making each handhold treacherous. Her muscles burned with fatigue, the accumulated strain of the mission taking its toll. Halfway up the cliff face, disaster nearly struck. As Amelia reached for a handhold, the rock crumbled beneath her fingers. For a terrifying second, she hung by one hand, her body swinging precariously over the deadly drop below. With a desperate lunge, she managed to secure another grip, stabilizing herself against the cliff face. The near fall had cost her precious seconds and energy. Worse, the dislodged rocks had created noise as they clattered down the mountainside. Any Russian forces in the vicinity would now have a clear indication of her position. Sure enough, within moments, a searchlight began sweeping methodically toward the cliff face. Amelia had perhaps 30 seconds before the light would expose her position. There was no place to hide on the vertical rock wall, nowhere to conceal herself from the approaching illumination. She had only one option: climb faster than they could react. Pushing beyond normal human limits, Amelia accelerated her ascent. Her fingers found holds that barely existed. Her boots scraped against the rock face, seeking any purchase that would propel her upward. The searchlight drew closer, now illuminating the base of the cliff. With a final, desperate surge of effort, Amelia pulled herself over the edge of the ridge just as the searchlight swept upward along the cliff face. She rolled away from the edge, putting solid rock between herself and the searching helicopter. For several seconds, she lay there, gasping for breath, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples. But there was no time to recover. She needed to prepare the extraction zone. The ridge was exactly as challenging as the maps had indicated. A narrow strip of relatively flat ground, barely 30 meters long and 10 meters wide. On three sides, sheer cliffs dropped hundreds of meters to the rocky terrain below. The fourth side merged into the dense forest she had just climbed through. Using her communications device, Amelia marked the exact coordinates and transmitted them to the incoming extraction helicopter. She then began clearing the landing zone of loose rocks and debris that could be kicked up by rotor wash and potentially damage the aircraft. The sound of Russian communications grew louder, ground forces now clearly making their way up the same path she had used. They were perhaps 10 minutes behind her, cutting it dangerously close to her extraction window. Amelia checked her watch. 5 minutes until the scheduled pickup. She took up a defensive position at the forest edge of the ridge, her sidearm ready. If Russian forces reached the ridge before the helicopter arrived, she would need to hold them off long enough for extraction. 4 minutes. 3. The sound of approaching Russian forces grew louder, voices now clearly audible as they coordinated their final approach. 2 minutes. Amelia could see flashlight beams through the trees, growing brighter as the Russian team closed in on her position. 1 minute. The first Russian operator emerged from the tree line, his weapon raised. Amelia fired 2 precise shots, not at the operator, but at the ground near his feet. The unexpected gunfire caused him to dive for cover, buying her precious seconds. 0. The extraction window had arrived, but there was no sign of the helicopter. Had the message failed to reach them? Had they deemed the extraction too risky? The Russian team was regrouping, preparing to rush her position from multiple angles. Amelia checked her ammunition. 1 full magazine plus 3 rounds in her weapon. Not enough for a prolonged engagement against what sounded like at least 8 operators. Then she heard it. A faint thudding that quickly grew louder. Helicopter rotors approaching from the southwest, exactly as she had specified. Relief flooded through her, immediately followed by renewed determination. The extraction was coming, but she still needed to hold off the Russian team long enough for the helicopter to land and for her to board. The Russian operators heard it too. Their communication suddenly became more urgent, coordinating a final push to capture her before extraction could be completed. Amelia fired another warning shot, forcing them to keep their distance for a few crucial seconds. The helicopter appeared, a dark shape against the night sky, its running lights dimmed to minimize visibility. It was smaller than standard military transports, a specialized craft designed for high-risk extractions in difficult terrain. Even with such an aircraft, the landing would be extremely dangerous. The pilot approached with remarkable skill, hovering over the ridge while assessing the limited landing space. Russian forces began firing from the tree line, rounds pinging off rocks near Amelia's position and tracing bright lines through the darkness toward the helicopter. Despite the incoming fire, the pilot maintained perfect control, bringing the aircraft down in a controlled descent that left minimal margin for error. The moment the skids touched the ridge, a side door slid open, and a figure leaned out, providing covering fire that forced the Russian operators back into the tree line. "Move!" the figure shouted over the roar of the rotors. Amelia sprinted toward the helicopter, keeping low to avoid both the Russian fire and the whirling rotor blades. As she reached the aircraft, a hand grabbed her arm, pulling her forcefully inside. She tumbled onto the floor of the cabin as the helicopter immediately began lifting, not even waiting for the door to close. The sudden acceleration pressed Amelia against the cabin wall as the pilot executed a steep banking turn, using the mountain's bulk to shield them from continued Russian fire. Within seconds, they were accelerating away from the ridge, rapidly gaining altitude and distance from the frustrated Russian forces. Only then did Amelia get a clear look at the person who had pulled her aboard. It was Vasquez, her face set in a grim expression that quickly gave way to a relieved smile. "Cutting it close, Captain," she remarked, securing the cabin door as the helicopter stabilized its flight path. "Unavoidable complications," Amelia replied, still catching her breath. "Mission successful?" Vasquez asked, though her presence on the extraction helicopter suggested she already knew the answer. Amelia nodded. "Petrovna." "Safe. Already debriefing with intelligence analysts. Her information is everything she claimed it would be." Vasquez handed Amelia a water bottle and an emergency blanket. The whole team made it out. Mission complete. The tension that had sustained Amelia through the ordeal began to ebb, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. She had done it. Completed her first mission with Wraith, successfully extracting a high-value asset from hostile territory against overwhelming odds. "Command was impressed," Vasquez continued. "Not many operators could have pulled off what you did today. Creating an alternate extraction point under those conditions? That's not standard protocol. That's Wraith thinking." Amelia took a long drink of water. It seemed like the only option at the time. That's exactly what Wraith is about, finding the option that doesn't exist on paper. Vasquez replied, "When you called in that Wraith 1 code, Wright herself took notice. Said it showed exactly the kind of adaptive thinking they've been looking for." The helicopter continued its flight path, maintaining low altitude to avoid radar detection as it made its way toward friendly airspace. In the cockpit, the pilot, a Wraith operator Amelia hadn't met before, navigated with the same exceptional skill she had displayed during the ridge extraction. "What happens now?" Amelia asked after several minutes of silence. Vasquez studied her thoughtfully. "That depends on you. This was supposed to be a one-time operation, a test to see if you had what it takes. Based on today's performance, I'd say you passed with flying colors. And if I want it to be more than a one-time operation, then you become a ghost," Vasquez replied simply. "You leave behind your official position, your service record, your identity. You become part of something that doesn't officially exist." The implication was clear. Joining Wraith permanently would mean walking away from her established career, from the recognition and advancement she had worked toward for years. It would mean operating in shadows, completing missions that would never appear in any official record, saving lives that would never know who had saved them. "It's not a decision to make lightly," Vasquez added, seeming to read Amelia's thoughts. "Take some time. Think it through." Before Amelia could respond, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Approaching friendly airspace. ETA to base 20 minutes." The remainder of the flight passed in companionable silence, both women lost in their own thoughts. When the helicopter finally touched down at a remote airfield, Amelia was surprised to see Commander Wright waiting for them, her posture military straight despite the late hour. As Amelia disembarked, still wrapped in the emergency blanket and moving stiffly from exhaustion and cold, Wright approached. "Captain Reyes," she acknowledged with a nod. "Walk with me." They moved away from the helicopter, toward a small administrative building at the edge of the airfield. Wright maintained silence until they were inside, the door closed behind them. Petrovna's intelligence has already been verified and is being acted upon at the highest levels. Wright began without preamble. Multiple Russian assassination networks across Europe will be dismantled in the coming days. Dozens of lives will be saved. None of that would have happened without today's operation. "I'm glad to hear it was worth the risk," Amelia replied. "It was worth more than you know," Wright said, her usually stoic expression softening slightly. "But that's not why I wanted to speak with you. I wanted to discuss your performance today." Amelia straightened instinctively, years of military conditioning kicking in. "I made several deviations from the established protocol, which is exactly what impressed me," Wright interrupted. "Wraith doesn't need operators who follow protocols blindly. We need people who can adapt when protocols fail, who can create solutions where none exist." She paused, studying Amelia with an evaluative gaze. "Your improvised extraction plan was brilliant. Risky, certainly, but brilliant." "Thank you, Commander. I understand Vasquez has already mentioned the possibility of you joining Wraith permanently," Wright continued. "I want to be clear about what that entails. This isn't a typical special operations unit. We exist outside the normal chain of command, outside the normal rules of engagement." "With respect, ma'am, I gathered that much already." Wright almost smiled. "Fair enough, but there's more you need to understand. Joining Wraith means accepting that your achievements will never be recognized publicly. There will be no medals, no commendations in your service record, no promotions that your family can celebrate. The only people who will ever know what you've accomplished are the ones in this program." "And the people we save," Amelia added quietly. "Yes," Wright nodded. "Though most of them will never know who saved them or how. That's the nature of what we do. We're ghosts. We appear when needed, then vanish without a trace." The choice before Amelia was stark. Continue her established career path, with its clear trajectory and public recognition, or step into the shadows with Wraith, doing work that mattered deeply but would never be acknowledged. "I need your decision within 48 hours, Wright said. "If you choose to join us, your official status will be changed to special assignment with military intelligence. Your actual activities will be known only to those within Wraith. If you decline, you'll return to your previous position with a commendation for classified activities that will help your advancement." "And if I decline, what happens to the knowledge I now have about Wraith?" "You'll be debriefed and required to sign additional non-disclosure agreements," Wright replied. "But we chose you carefully, Captain. Your record indicates you understand the importance of operational security." After a few more minutes of discussion regarding practical matters, Wright left Amelia alone in the room to clean up and change into dry clothes that had been provided. As she changed, Amelia's thoughts raced through the implications of the choice before her. Everything in her career thus far had been building toward advancement, recognition, a distinguished service record. Joining Wraith would mean abandoning that path, stepping into a world where her accomplishments would remain forever in shadow. Yet, there was something undeniably compelling about what she had experienced today. The mission had pushed her to her absolute limits, had required her to draw on every skill and instinct she possessed. And the outcome, saving Petrovna, securing critical intelligence, potentially saving countless lives, provided a sense of purpose more profound than anything she had experienced in her conventional role. After cleaning up, Amelia was escorted to temporary quarters where she could rest before the formal debriefing scheduled for the following morning. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive as her mind continued to wrestle with the decision before her. The debriefing the next day was thorough but efficient. Amelia recounted every detail of her experience, from the moment she separated from the team through her improvised extraction. The panel, consisting of Wright, Colonel Blackwood, and 2 intelligence officers she didn't recognize, asked pointed questions about her decision-making process, particularly regarding the unorthodox extraction plan. "When you realized both primary and secondary extraction points were compromised, walk us through your thought process," one of the unknown officers requested. "I assessed the terrain for natural features that could serve as an improvised landing zone," Amelia explained. "The ridge offered minimal but sufficient space for a skilled pilot to attempt extraction. It was defensible from one direction, and the approach from the southwest provided some cover from Russian air assets. A conventional officer would have retreated to the emergency extraction point, as dictated by protocol, the officer noted. The emergency point was too distant to reach within the available window, Amelia replied. Sometimes protocols have to yield to operational realities. The officer exchanged a glance with Wraith, who nodded almost imperceptibly. After the debriefing concluded, Amelia found herself once again face-to-face with Colonel Blackwood, her former commanding officer, and the man who had first connected her to Wraith. "You did well out there, Amelia," he said, his formal demeanor softening. "Better than well, according to Wraith's assessment." "Thank you, sir." "Have you made your decision yet?" Amelia hesitated. "I'm still considering the implications." Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. "When I recommended you for this, I knew you had the skills. What I wasn't sure about was whether you had the mindset. This kind of work requires a certain perspective, being willing to operate without recognition, to succeed in silence." "It's a significant adjustment from the path I've been on," Amelia admitted. "It is," Blackwood agreed. "But I'll tell you something I realized late in my own career. The most meaningful work often happens in the shadows. The operations that truly change the course of events, that save the most lives, they're rarely the ones that make headlines." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I spent 20 years climbing the conventional ladder. Promotions, commendations, the respect of my peers. All of it mattered to me. Then I encountered Wraith during an operation in Sarajevo. I watched them extract a human rights attorney and her family from a situation my conventional team had deemed impossible. They appeared, completed the impossible mission, then vanished like smoke. And that changed your perspective?" "It showed me there was another way to serve," Blackwood replied. "A way that focused purely on the mission, on the lives saved, rather than on who got credit afterward." He met her gaze directly. "I've never regretted my decision to join them." The conversation with Blackwood gave Amelia additional perspective, but the final decision still weighed heavily as she returned to her temporary quarters. She had less than 24 hours remaining to make a choice that would fundamentally alter the course of her career and her life. That evening, as she sat alone reviewing the events of the mission, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Petrovna standing there, now dressed in civilian clothes, and looking remarkably different from the exhausted operative Amelia had helped extract. "May I come in?" Petrovna asked. Amelia stepped aside, surprised by the visit. "I thought you'd be halfway to a secure debriefing facility by now." "I'm leaving in an hour," Petrovna confirmed, entering the small room. "But I wanted to see you first, to thank you personally for what you did." "I was just doing my job," Amelia replied automatically. Petrovna smiled slightly. "No, your job would have been to follow protocol. To retreat to the emergency extraction point when the primary and secondary options were compromised. Instead, you created a third option that nobody had planned for. You risked your life to ensure the mission succeeded." She paused, her expression growing more serious. 3 years undercover teaches you to recognize certain qualities in people. I watched you adapt to impossible circumstances, create solutions where none existed, and put the mission above your own safety. Those aren't just skills, Captain Reyes. They're character. "I appreciate that," Amelia said, genuinely moved by the assessment. "Wraith told me you're considering joining Wraith permanently." Petrovna continued. "For what it's worth, they need people like you. People who understand that sometimes the most important victories are the ones no one ever hears about." After Petrovna left, Amelia stood at the window of her quarters, looking out at the secure facility where Wraith operated. The compound appeared ordinary from the outside. Administrative buildings, training areas, helicopter pads. Nothing to suggest it housed one of the most elite and secretive extraction units in existence. Yet within those ordinary-looking buildings, extraordinary operations were being planned and executed. Lives were being saved. Missions deemed impossible by conventional forces were being completed. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the compound, Amelia made her decision. The next morning, she walked purposefully to Commander Wright's office, knocked once and entered when invited. Wright looked up from her desk, her expression neutral. "Captain Reyes, I assume you've reached a decision." "I have," Amelia confirmed. I want to join Wraith permanently. Wright studied her for a moment, then nodded. May I ask what influenced your choice? Amelia considered the question carefully. During the extraction, when I was on that ridge with Russian forces closing in, I realized something. Throughout my career, I've been focused on advancement, on recognition, on building a record that others would respect. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was completing the mission, getting Petrovna and her intelligence out safely. She paused, organizing her thoughts. I've never felt more purposeful than I did planning that improvised extraction, finding a solution where none should have existed. If Wraith offers the opportunity to do that kind of work regularly, to save lives that conventional operations can't reach, then that's where I belong. Wright's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested approval. Very well. Effective immediately, you are assigned to Wraith under operational designation Echo 6. Your official military record will show a transfer to Special Activities Division, Intelligence Branch. All other details will be classified at the highest level. Quote, she stood, extending her hand. Welcome to Wraith, Amelia. We operate in shadows, we leave no traces, and we never, ever leave our people behind. As Amelia shook Wright's hand, accepting her new role and identity, she felt a profound sense of alignment, as if she had finally found exactly where she was meant to be. The path ahead would be challenging, dangerous, and would never bring public recognition. But it would be meaningful in ways her previous career could never have matched. When do I start? She asked. You already have, Wright replied. Report to Training Facility B at 0600 tomorrow. Vasquez will begin your specialized operational training. As Amelia left the office, she passed a wall of photographs, the only visible acknowledgement of Wraith's activities. The images showed various terrains and situations but no personnel. Each photo represented a successful mission, a life saved, an impossible extraction completed. No names, no faces, no recognition. Just the quiet record of work done in shadows by people who had chosen purpose over praise. Amelia paused before the wall, imagining her own contribution someday being represented by similar anonymous images. It was a different kind of legacy than she had once envisioned for herself, but perhaps a more meaningful one. The next morning, as she reported for her first day of specialized training, Amelia felt a lightness she hadn't expected. She had left behind the familiar path, the clear trajectory of advancement and recognition. In its place, she had embraced uncertainty, danger, and anonymity. But she had also gained something invaluable, a purpose that transcended personal achievement, a team that valued results over recognition, and the knowledge that the work she would do, though never acknowledged publicly, would change lives in ways that truly mattered. As she entered the training facility, Vasquez greeted her with a nod of respect. Ready to become a ghost, Echo 6? Amelia smiled, embracing her new identity. Ready. 6 months into her new role with Wraith, Amelia found herself transformed. The specialized training had been unlike anything in her previous military experience, more intense, more comprehensive, and focused on skills rarely taught in conventional programs. Advanced communications, improvised extraction techniques, hostile environment survival, and a host of other specialized abilities that enabled Wraith operators to succeed where conventional teams couldn't. The training had changed her physically. She was leaner, faster, stronger than she had ever been. But the most profound changes were mental. She thought differently now, seeing possibilities where others saw obstacles, finding paths where others saw only barriers. Echo 6, Status Report. Vasquez's voice came through her earpiece, using Amelia's operational designation rather than her name, standard procedure for all Wraith communications. Position secured. Amelia responded, her voice barely above a whisper. Target building in sight. Security patterns consistent with intelligence assessment. She was perched on a rooftop overlooking a nondescript office building in Bangkok. According to intelligence, the building contained a secure server room housing evidence of a human trafficking network that spanned multiple countries. A joint task force was preparing to take down the network, but they needed the server data to identify all involved parties and locate victims. Conventional approaches had been deemed too risky. The organization had law enforcement contacts who would alert them to any official operation. Wraith had been called in to extract the data, without leaving any trace of the intrusion. Echo 3 and Echo 4 in position. Torres reported from his location covering the building's rear entrance. Security rotation in 30 seconds. Amelia checked her equipment one final time. Unlike her first mission with Wraith, this operation had been meticulously planned. Every contingency had been considered, every security measure analyzed. But as Wright had emphasized during the briefing, even the most perfect plan rarely survived contact with reality. "Execute on my mark," Vasquez ordered from her position coordinating the operation. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Amelia moved with practiced efficiency, using a specialized launcher to fire a nearly invisible carbon fiber line across to the target building. Within seconds, she had secured the line and was sliding silently across the gap, 100 feet above the street below. Landing softly on the target building's roof, she immediately moved to the access door they had identified during reconnaissance.
The electronic lock was exactly as expected, a high-end security system that would be impenetrable to most infiltrators. But Amelia wasn't most infiltrators. Using a device developed specifically for Wraith operations, she bypassed the security system without triggering any alarms. The door opened silently, revealing a dimly lit stairwell. "Access achieved," she reported. Moving to Phase 2, she descended the stairs rapidly but silently, counting floors, until she reached the 6th level, where intelligence indicated the server room was located. The hallway was empty, just as their surveillance had suggested it would be at this hour. Moving to the server room door, Amelia encountered the next security barrier, a biometric scanner requiring both fingerprint and retinal identification. "Echo 6 at server room," she reported, implementing bypass. From her equipment, she removed what appeared to be an ordinary tablet. In reality, it was a sophisticated device capable of projecting specific biometric signatures. Using data collected by intelligence assets, the device could mimic the fingerprints and retinal patterns of authorized personnel. The bypass worked flawlessly. The security panel blinked green, and the door unlocked with a soft click. Inside, the server room hummed with the sound of cooling fans and electronic equipment. Amelia moved directly to the main terminal, inserting a specialized drive designed to extract data without leaving digital footprints. "Extraction in progress," she reported as the drive began copying the server contents. Estimated completion time 4 minutes. Echo 5 reports movement in the lobby. Chen's voice came through her earpiece. Security personnel arriving outside scheduled rotation. This was unexpected, a deviation from the patterns they had observed during weeks of surveillance. Amelia's mind raced through the implications. Had they been detected? Was this a random security check? Either way, the situation had just become significantly more complicated. "Continue with extraction," Vasquez ordered. "Echo 5, monitor and report. All other elements maintain position." The data extraction continued, the progress bar on Amelia's device slowly filling as gigabytes of information transferred to the secure drive. 3 minutes remaining. 2 minutes. "Security personnel entering elevator," Chen reported. "Ascending." "Destination floor?" Vasquez asked. "Unknown. Unable to determine from current position." Amelia made a quick decision. "I'm implementing countermeasures," she informed the team, already moving to the server room door. Using a device from her equipment, she subtly modified the electronic lock to register as malfunctioning if anyone attempted to access it. "Smart move, Echo 6, Vasquez acknowledged. "Status of extraction?" Amelia checked the device. 90% complete. Estimate complete extraction in 45 seconds. "Security personnel exiting elevator on floor 4, Chen reported. 2 individuals, armed, moving methodically. Appears to be a standard security sweep." Amelia allowed herself a small breath of relief. Floor 4, not 6. But the situation remained precarious. If the security team continued their sweep upward, they would reach her position before she could complete the extraction and exit the building. "Extraction complete," she reported as the device signaled successful data transfer. She removed the drive and secured it, leaving no trace of her access on the terminal. "Echo 5 reports security team ascending to floor 5, Chen updated. Estimated arrival at your position in 2 minutes. Amelia evaluated her options. The stairwell she had used to enter would likely be checked by the security team. The elevator was too risky. She needed an alternative. Implementing exit strategy Bravo, she decided, moving to a maintenance panel in the corner of the server room. According to the building schematics they had studied, this panel should provide access to a service shaft that ran the height of the building. The panel opened smoothly, revealing the narrow shaft beyond. Without hesitation, Amelia slipped into the space, pulling the panel closed behind her. The shaft was tight, barely wide enough for a person to navigate, but it offered a direct route to both the roof and the basement levels. Echo 6, position? Vasquez asked, tension evident in her voice. In service shaft, moving to roof extraction point, Amelia replied, already climbing upward using the maintenance rungs built into the shaft wall. She moved quickly but carefully, aware that any noise might alert the security team to her presence. The shaft was hot and poorly ventilated, making each breath a conscious effort, but she maintained her pace. Security team has reached floor 6, Chen reported. They're checking each room systematically. Amelia increased her pace, pushing through the discomfort. 3 more levels to the roof. 2. 1. She reached the top of the shaft, finding a maintenance hatch that opened onto the roof. Carefully, she eased it open, scanning for any security presence before pulling herself out and securing the hatch behind her. Echo 6 en route, moving to extraction point, she reported, already making her way to the designated location where her descent line remained secured. Be advised, second security team detected entering the building, Chen warned. Possible response to first team's findings. This was rapidly evolving from a standard extraction to a potential compromise situation. If security discovered evidence of intrusion, the entire operation could be exposed, and the trafficking network might be alerted before law enforcement could act on the intelligence. All elements, prepare for immediate extraction, Vasquez ordered. Echo 6, status? Preparing for descent, Amelia replied, securing her harness to the carbon fiber line. The 100-foot drop to the adjacent building now seemed far more daunting with the possibility of security personnel emerging onto the roof at any moment. Just as she prepared to begin her descent, the roof access door burst open. 2 security guards emerged, weapons drawn, scanning the rooftop methodically. Amelia froze, pressing herself against the low wall that concealed her position. Discovery now would force a direct confrontation, something Wraith operations explicitly sought to avoid. The guards moved across the roof, their flashlights sweeping in precise patterns that would soon expose her position. She had perhaps 30 seconds before discovery became inevitable. In that moment, every aspect of her Wraith training crystallized into perfect clarity. She wasn't just an operator following protocols. She was Wraith, adaptable, resourceful, invisible. Reaching into her equipment, she extracted a small device designed for exactly this type of situation. With practiced precision, she activated it and tossed it to the far corner of the roof, where it landed silently. 3 seconds later, a soft but distinct electronic signal emitted from the device, similar to the sound of a radio receiving an encrypted transmission. The guards immediately turned toward the sound, moving away from Amelia's position to investigate what they clearly believed was another operator communicating. In that crucial moment of distraction, Amelia slipped over the edge of the building, descending the line with controlled speed. By the time the guards realized they had been misdirected, she was already halfway to the adjacent rooftop. Echo 6 clear, she reported as her feet touched down on the neighboring building. Data secured. Proceeding to extraction vehicle. Within minutes, she had made her way down through the building via a service elevator and emerged onto a busy Bangkok street, blending seamlessly with the evening crowd. No running, no obvious haste. Just another foreign business person heading back to their hotel after a long day. The extraction vehicle, an unmarked sedan that looked identical to thousands of others in the city, was waiting exactly where planned. Amelia entered casually, showing no sign of the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Package secure? Vasquez asked from the driver's seat, equally casual in her demeanor. Confirmed, Amelia replied, handing over the drive containing the vital intelligence. Complete extraction, no traces left. As they drove through the crowded streets, maintaining a pace that would attract no attention, Amelia felt the familiar post-mission combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. 6 months and 8 operations with Wraith had each presented unique challenges, but the underlying principle remained constant: appear from nowhere, accomplish the impossible, then vanish like smoke. The team regrouped at their temporary safe house, a nondescript apartment in a middle-class neighborhood far from the tourist areas of Bangkok. Chen was already analyzing the extracted data, his fingers flying across specialized equipment that would transmit the intelligence to the Joint Task Force without revealing Wraith's involvement. "This is exactly what we needed," he confirmed after several minutes of analysis. "Complete network architecture, client lists, victim locations, everything. The task force can move within 24 hours. Quote, Vasquez nodded, satisfaction evident despite her typically reserved demeanor. "Good work, all elements. Especially you, Echo 6. That roof extraction was textbook improvisation." "Just applied my training," Amelia replied modestly. "No," Torres interjected. "That wasn't just training. That was instinct. The kind that can't be taught." The team continued debriefing, analyzing every aspect of the operation to identify lessons for future missions. It was standard procedure, but Amelia had come to appreciate how these detailed post-mission analyses contributed to Wraith's exceptional success rate. Later, as the team prepared for extraction from Thailand, Commander Wright contacted them via secure communication. Her image on the encrypted video feed was as composed as ever, but there was a hint of unusual urgency in her manner. "The Bangkok operation has been confirmed as a complete success," she informed them. "The intelligence you extracted has already led to the identification of 27 trafficking victims who are being rescued as we speak. The network's leadership will be apprehended within 48 hours. The team exchanged glances of quiet satisfaction. This was the reward that mattered, not medals or public recognition, but the knowledge that their actions had directly saved lives. However, Wright continued, "I'm redirecting your team effective immediately. A situation has developed in Morocco that requires Wraith intervention. Intelligence analyst Thomas Mercer has been operating undercover tracking weapons shipments to terrorist organizations in the Sahel. His cover was compromised yesterday, and he's gone dark. His last transmission indicated he has critical intelligence that could prevent an imminent attack." Amelia felt a familiar tension return to her muscles. The brief satisfaction of mission completion was already giving way to the focused preparation for a new challenge. "Conventional extraction has been deemed impossible," Wright explained, displaying satellite imagery of a remote compound in the Atlas Mountains. "Mercer's last known location is here, approximately 70 kilometers from Marrakesh. The area is controlled by militants with sophisticated surveillance and air defense systems. Any conventional approach would be detected and likely result in Mercer's execution." "Parameters?" Vasquez asked, already studying the imagery with a tactical eye. "Full operational discretion," Wright replied. "Timeline is critical. Intelligence suggests Mercer will be moved to a more secure location within 36 hours. After that, extraction probability drops below acceptable thresholds." "Available assets?" Torres inquired. "Minimal. You'll have limited support due to the sensitive political situation. No official U.S. presence can be acknowledged in the region." The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, covering what little intelligence was available and outlining the extreme challenges of the operation. When it concluded, the team immediately began planning, each member focusing on their specialized area of expertise. For Amelia, this meant communications and infiltration strategy. While the others worked on extraction routes and tactical approaches, she immersed herself in the communications infrastructure of the region, identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited to locate Mercer more precisely and establish secure extraction channels. As she worked, a realization gradually formed. This mission was fundamentally different from her previous operations with Wraith. The Bangkok extraction had been meticulously planned, with weeks of intelligence gathering and preparation. This new mission offered no such luxury. They would be operating with minimal intelligence, in hostile territory, against an enemy with significant resources. The odds of success were objectively low. The risks were extraordinarily high. Yet not a single member of the team hesitated or questioned the mission. They simply adapted, planned, prepared, focusing on solutions rather than obstacles. 12 hours later, as their transport aircraft approached Moroccan airspace under the cover of a falsified flight plan, Amelia found herself seated next to Vasquez, both women making final equipment checks before the high-altitude insertion that would begin their mission. "Something on your mind, Echo 6?" Vasquez asked, noticing Amelia's momentary pause in her preparations. "Just thinking about how different this is from my previous work," Amelia admitted. "In conventional operations, we wouldn't attempt something with these parameters. The risk assessment alone would shut it down before it started." Vasquez nodded, understanding evident in her expression. "That's the fundamental difference with Wraith. We don't define mission parameters by what's conventionally possible. We redefine what's possible based on mission requirements." She secured the final piece of her equipment before continuing. 6 months ago, you were a promising intelligence officer with an impressive conventional career ahead of you. Now you're preparing to infiltrate a terrorist stronghold to extract an asset that conventional forces wouldn't even attempt to reach. You think I made the right choice? Amelia asked, voicing the question that occasionally still surfaced in quiet moments. "I think you found where you belong," Vasquez replied simply. "Some people are meant to operate within established parameters. Others are meant to redefine them. You're the latter." The aircraft's warning light flashed, indicating they were approaching the drop zone. The team made final preparations, each member focused entirely on the challenging mission ahead. As Amelia stood at the aircraft's open door, the vast darkness of the Moroccan night spread out below her. She felt a profound clarity. 6 months ago, she had walked away from a conventional career path with its clear trajectory and public recognition. She had stepped into shadows, becoming part of something that officially didn't exist. In doing so, she had discovered something essential about herself. She wasn't meant to follow established paths. She was meant to create new ones where none existed before. The jump light turned green. "Wraith elements, execute," Vasquez ordered. One by one, they disappeared into the darkness, falling toward a mission deemed impossible by conventional standards. As Amelia stepped into the void, she embraced not just the mission, but the identity she had chosen. She was Echo 6. She was Wraith. She appeared when needed, accomplished the impossible, then vanished like smoke. 2 days later, as their extraction helicopter lifted off from a remote landing zone in the Atlas Mountains, Amelia sat across from analyst Thomas Mercer, battered, exhausted, but alive and in possession of the critical intelligence he had risked his life to obtain. The mission had been as challenging as anticipated. They had encountered multiple situations where failure seemed inevitable, where conventional operators would have been forced to abort. But at each crucial moment, the team had found solutions where none should have existed, creating possibilities through sheer will and ingenuity. As the helicopter banked away from the mountains, Mercer leaned forward, his voice barely audible over the rotor noise. "They said no one could get me out, that I was on my own." "That's usually when they call us," Amelia replied. "Who exactly are you people?" he asked. Amelia exchanged glances with Vasquez, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "We're Wraith," Amelia told him. "We don't exist until we're needed. Then we do what everyone else says can't be done. And when it's over, we disappear." "Like ghosts," Mercer said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Like smoke," Amelia corrected, remembering her first meeting with Wright and the question that had changed the course of her life. "Have you ever heard of a ghost who saves lives instead of haunting them?" 6 months ago, Amelia had been Captain Reyes, an intelligence officer with a promising conventional career. Now she was Echo 6, a Wraith operator who materialized in impossible situations, achieved what others deemed unachievable, then vanished without a trace. The transition hadn't been easy. She had sacrificed the recognition and advancement that had once been central to her professional identity. She had embraced anonymity and accepted that her achievements would never be acknowledged publicly. But in return, she had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, doing precisely what she was meant to do. Not following established protocols, but creating new possibilities where none had existed before. Not climbing a conventional ladder of success, but redefining what success meant on her own terms. As the helicopter carried them toward safety and the successful conclusion of another impossible mission, Amelia realized that she had never felt more fulfilled, more purposeful, more aligned with her true nature. She had become the smoke that appeared when needed most, the ghost that saved lives rather than haunting them, the wraith that materialized to accomplish the impossible before vanishing again. And in that identity, that purpose, she had found her true calling. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.